So, Julie, it's terrific to have you address our HFS leadership community. Really, thank you for the time. I'm sure everyone appreciates this. So, after everything we've been through the last couple of years, how do you see services relationships shifting? How do you see them changing? What's different from before? And are they becoming more purposeful? And do you think clients are ready for change, Julie?
Well, thanks, Phil, and thanks for having me today. It's great to be here. Let me answer that question first by giving you three examples of how you may be encountering in your daily life, depending on where you live, services. So if you live in Latin America and you need a car or consumer loan, you may be working with a bank where we help them reduce from literally days to minutes, the approval time to get a car loan, increase car loans by 50% and significantly decrease costs. Keeping with the theme of cars, if you have bought a Jaguar Land Rover, then you have been touched by our marketing operations, which is helping personalize that experience at the heart of the JLR strategy to reimagine and become a modern luxury brand. And if you happen to live in North America, there's a certain retailer where we've been doing supply chain for some years so that when the pandemic happened, most likely you were being able to access more quickly than other retailers, the goods that you need, because we've helped them increase their demand forecasting by 8%. We're able to do more when the pandemic hit. So why do I share those three examples? They had one thing in common. You call it purpose. Those examples were not about cost. They were about a shared purpose, driving growth, right? Making products available, being more resilient, right? And all of them also involved a decrease in cost. And the reason I wanted to start with real life examples is that there's been a shift that started for the leaders a few years ago, but really has been accelerating in the pandemic, where from the very top, CEOs are seeing managed services, both on the technology side and in operations, as core to their strategy to digitize faster and to access talent and achieve their outcomes beyond cost. It's not that before the pandemic, those things didn't exist. We've been doing our marketing operations for years. We've been doing supply chain for years, but there's been a massive acceleration. I've done in the last 3 quarters alone, over 200 client meetings. I would tell you 85% or so involves some discussion about how managed services may help accelerate their transformation. And I think, I was reading your article around the 3 evolution of services, and I think it's so critical to understand, because what's happening is not just about why we need to have different commercial constructs, but about why managed services are relevant to the CEO agenda in a very different way than before.
Okay. So we talk a lot about co-creation. How is Accenture engaging with the tech ecosystem, for example, to respond to client needs and really co-create with your clients?
Phil, it starts again with what's happening. So you are seeing what we call total enterprise reinvention, right? So the use of tech, data, and AI in every part of the organization. And so we are doing co-creation with our tech partners and our clients. It almost always involves the clients, both in the services, the managed services and the non-managed service. So let me give you an example. Sustainability is huge. Water is a really important resource. We worked with Ecopetrol, the oil and gas company in Colombia, and one of our cloud partners to create the first water management solution. It's a platform. We'll take it across the industry. We co-created it from scratch, right? And then there'll be a part of it that will also be a managed service, because that's more efficient for our clients. Similarly, we're doing things like reimagining demand forecasting with our clients. I gave you one example. We're taking it to the next level. And so as managed services and technology become core to the growth agenda and the strategy of the company, there's not always something that you take off the shelf, right? And so we put a lot of investment in the co-creation with our clients and our partners. And in fact, the way I measure my own performance is how many client meetings I'm doing, but also how many ecosystem partner meetings. So I've done over 50 in the last 3 quarters. Why is that important? Is because in our view, our clients need us to be working really closely with the ecosystem. And I often will ask our clients, how often are you meeting with your ecosystem partner, not around a commercial construct, but really simply to understand what they're seeing and what their roadmap is to help inform your own roadmap?
Right. I think it's fascinating, especially the example about really bridging out the ecosystem and forecasting demand for something so important as water. So thanks for sharing that. So many people would love to know, I mean, the company at your size and scale, I mean, you'll be at 1 million people in the not too distant future, right, Julie? So how do you move nimbly with speed at scale? How do you operate at this sheer size you're at? Can you share a little of the secret sauce there?
So there's 3 things that I would share that I think are important that I talk to our clients about all the time. The first is understand what is the cultural change that you need to make. I often will hear people say, we need to change our culture, but they can't articulate it. In our case, when we created digital and it was small, we said we needed a distinct but connected culture because we needed to nurture a new kind of talent. By the time you got to 2019, I didn't want things to be distinct. I needed to create solutions. So we moved from a culture of distinct but connected to shared success, and we put things behind it. Second, pick the right symbols. The answer to change is often not a million new objectives and KPIs. When I became CEO, the most important big change that I needed to make was to make sure all of my senior leaders were at clients, because in order to move fast, you have to be absolutely close to the client, and you needed to do so at the most senior level. And so I did something super simple. My first quarter, I put a scorecard up in front of all of my managing directors that said how many client meetings I had done that quarter and how many ecosystem partner meetings. Nothing else. And in 9 months, my client account leads told me all the senior people are showing up at clients and they're meeting with the ecosystem partners. That was an important part of how we move so quickly. And then third, you have to do things differently. After the pandemic, a lot of CEOs said, look how fast we moved, we're going to move. And I would always ask one question: what have you changed? And if you couldn't articulate what you've changed, because we can't operate in a crisis mode, and it's not simply, I've learned as a CEO, top down, you can just say it. So oftentimes, for example, companies don't change their procurement processes, so they can't be fast, right? In my case, what I did was, for the first time in our history, I set our top strategic priorities not on 12 months. So when we started our fiscal year after the pandemic, normally, like everyone else, I would have said, here's our strategic priorities, and I would have measured them in a 12-month cycle because that's how long the fiscal year is. We don't do that anymore. Some are fiscal year goals, but many are reset or only 6-month goals, because how do you make change if you say to everyone, our change only operates on the fiscal year cycle? So those are 3 things that have been hugely impactful in helping us move.
Interesting. And we mentioned a lot about these C-level discussions, but how do you get them to the table? What do you feel is working to get them really engaged in the ecosystem conversation?
Well, it really starts with understanding and being able to talk about value. Right. So one of the things that we did a couple of years ago is we launched our new strategy, which was all around creating what we call 360-degree value. And that value is about not just economic value, but companies today, they need to think about talent. That's one of the top 3 issues for any CEO. They have to think about sustainability and how do you embed the sustainability. And so we are trying to look at both the value we create for our own stakeholders and our offerings and our clients in a 360-degree value way. And when I have that conversation, it completely changes it. So let me give you an example in services. Right? So we have a client where we took over about 6,000 of their people. We're relating, delivering huge value both on cost and outcomes with their customers. But one of the most important things, which is consistent with your view around one ecosystem, was around talent. Those 6,000 people in that captive, none of them had ever had AI training. Within a year, 75% of them have had training. They weren't being promoted. They didn't have career pathways. Within a year, 17% had received promotions. And you can go on and on about the talent transformation. That CEO doesn't see us as separately. He didn't throw things over the wall. He sees us as a part of his talent strategy. It's a part of accelerating the transformation. And those are the kinds of conversations. And I think it's so important when you are responsible for your global business services at a company is to think about how is what you're doing actually able to contribute to the sustainability agenda because more of it's in the cloud? How are you able to deliver a different talent and employee experience, including through your partners, and really thinking about it end to end? And that's why I love the paper that you did on one ecosystem, because it's no longer keeping things in silos. And what we find most companies today still think of like their shared services partner in a silo, and they don't think of them as end to end. How do they plug in? And then how do you have the partners literally part of the leadership team because you're thinking end to end? It's one of the biggest issues that we have in helping our clients think differently.
Excellent, thanks. So Julie, sustainability, diversity, maintaining a workforce of engaged and motivated talent are really top of mind, as we know, for leaders today. So just from a high level, what are you doing to achieve your goals here, and what should be top of mind for leaders to set their strategies, and how do they get beyond the rhetoric to drive real corporate actions in your view, Julie?
Well, this is one of my favorite topics. It's, moving from commitment to action. So it starts with actually setting goals. We've actually had a goal in diversity around gender that we would be 50-50 by 2025 and 30% of our managing directors. We also set goals around race and ethnicity in the 3 countries where we're allowed to measure it. With respect to the environment, we were the first in our industry to set a net zero goal that I'm aware of. And we have very clear goals. We will, for example, be 70% use of renewable energy this year. And there's a couple of important things. So first of all, it is setting goals, right? Secondly, making them public. It holds you to a higher standard of care. And third, measuring them. So I have something called the Shared Success Scorecard, which are top 500 leaders. We have 700,000 people, more than that. So it's our top 500 leaders. And they have on that scorecard something we call the Fundamental 5. And the Fundamental 5 are financial results, of course, people, which is engagement, attrition, as well as diversity, sustainability, so our climate goals, communities, and partners. And so those are the fundamental 5. We also have 5 strategic priorities, but the messaging to the organization. And then the final point is when I do earnings, and if you go to our script, I do not report only the financial results. Starting our last fiscal year and every quarter since then, every single quarter, I report against the 360-degree values, so sustainability, diversity, and so on, and what we're doing. And we now report, for example, against every major ESG framework. So it's really treating these topics as business priorities with plans and accountability behind it. And it holds us to the right standard of care.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Julie Sweet. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I'm really delighted to share this with our audience today. And hopefully we'll be able to engage you in person soon.
Great. Well, thanks, Phil, for having me.